So I wanted to just pop on the camera here and give voice to an incredibly important topic that I don't think is talked about nearly enough. And this is the topic of whether or not we're making our choices from reactivity or proactivity. So this is a really deep, important question that, quite frankly, I think all of us should be asking ourselves constantly throughout our lives as we navigate life. Am I making choices from reactivity or from proactivity? Am I making choices from what I want to get away from or what I reject or what I'm uncomfortable with? Or am I making choices from a centered, clear, aligned place in myself? Am I making choices based on my values and what matters to me and what makes good logical sense, but also good intuitive sense? Or am I making decisions based on fear, on impulses, on feelings that I haven't processed yet? So I really want to give voice to this because this is one of the major places I think where people operate unconsciously and it can really, really ruin your life. So I think it's really important for us to look at how reactivity has shaped us, right? To look at your early life, for example, your childhood, and how reactivity and perhaps felt sense intuitive reactions created choices in you that shaped maybe your personality or your identity, your sense of self, or your life trajectory, the things you did or the things you refused to do, right? The things that you grasped for, the things that you rejected, right? Think about how much of that is defined not out of clear conscious choosing, but out of reactivity, out of impulse, out of emotion, out of fear, out of some unprocessed current in your body driving you to act before you understand what that is and where that's coming from in you. Think about how this shapes your current choices. In my experience, just to be real with you guys, I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life, let's be honest. Uh, when I see people who make bad decisions, whether that's a relationship or a bad financial decision or, over investing in something like a house or a car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what I see over and over and over is people who are operating from reactivity instead of clarity, alignment, being centered in one's own values, a well kind of thought out decision, or a fully considered set of implications, right? So most of us operate way too much from reactivity. And this is, just basic survival programming. Like reactivity is nothing more than that part of us in the nervous system that wants to get away from threat, that wants to get away from what's uncomfortable, unsafe, what feels not right. It's that simple. So there's not a whole lot of like fidelity and clarity and depth of view with reactivity. It's very much in the moment. It is not big picture. It is not over a longer span of time, right? So what I see over and over and over and what I've seen in myself and the lives of my friends and loved ones and people in the world is that so much of our decision making is based in reactivity. And this is one of the major ways that we end up screwing up our lives, quite frankly, and one of the major ways that we end up kind of ruining our mental health. Because then we end up making choices based on a dysregulated nervous system and running with those choices, even though they're not well measured or not centered in the holism of who we are. And then, from that place, then we end up in a worse situation. And then, of course, we're more stressed and we're more dysregulated, rinse and repeat. And that's how people end up in downward spirals, essentially, right? By contrast, the other option here is that we slow down, that we regulate ourselves, that we listen to our own being, we listen to our own emotions, but we also consider the cognitive aspects. We think things through. We look at the longer span of time. We look at the bigger picture. We look at the ramifications, the implications. We weigh, risk to benefit ratio, right? We do all these kinds of thinking through, and we really get clear. And then we make decisions not from these impulses of unprocessed emotion, but from real clarity. Now, I know this is really basic. I know for a lot of you out here, you're probably watching this and going, yeah, I already know this. But this is really something to slow down and tune into. And I think even the most conscious of us need to really check for this impulse. And if you're someone who's just kind of new to personal development or psychedelics or personal growth or spiritual awakening or any of that, Same rules apply here. And this is really one of the major things to look at that defines your life. So again, I would just encourage you to slow down for a moment and really think, what has defined your life? Has it been reactivity or has it been proactivity? And what are the results that that's gotten you? And look around at others in your life and how they make decisions and where that comes from in them and the quality of those decisions, right? And I would encourage you to really just start to track and become aware of and attuned to when you're making choices from reactivity and notice what results from those reactions. Uh, I guess last thing I want to say here, and then we'll wrap the video, is that I think there's a really important distinction to make between intuition and reactivity, right? So I think when it comes to the inner guidance of intuition, that's also a felt sense thing. But I think intuition can also be very much in the moment, be very nuanced, be very subtle, but very much like an immediate knowing. But I think generally our intuition, if we're really listening to it, is spot on and correct. And so part of the work here is separating out reactivity from intuition, right? And learning how to really recognize when intuition is speaking in your body rather than reactivity. And sometimes they'll give you the same message. So it can be really hard to tell, but working at that is a huge part of separating this out. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying don't make decisions from intuition, because I think intuition is part of this slowing down, this getting present. That might include also cognitive aspects of really thinking things through, like I was saying, and considering all the factors that I was just talking about. Intuition is part of that, right? But reactivity is not. Reactivity is, is part of the metaphor here, being like a chicken with its head cut off, running around, just willy-nilly, just responding and reacting as a nervous system. So let's leave it there. And I hope this message helps you out. Much love.